Hello students, welcome to another lecture of human anatomy and physiology, and in today's lecture we will be discussing about the body fluids and blood in details. So let's start. So coming to the introduction of body fluids, so as the name suggests, body fluids, they are the liquids which originate from the bodies of living beings, and the body fluid approximately it makes up 70% of the entire body weight of a human being. Body fluids can be further subdivided into two categories, the first being intracellular fluid and the second being extracellular fluid. Right? So intracellular fluids, they are the fluid which are contained within a particular cell, and extracellular fluid is the fluid which is present outside the cell. Now coming to blood. Now, as we have discussed in our chapter which contained tissues, so under connective tissue, we studied that blood is an example of connective tissue, right? So, blood is a fluid connective tissue which is present in the human body. It circulates constantly around the body, allowing constant communication between cells and tissues which are present in different areas of the human body. Right? Talking about the function, it helps in the transportation of oxygen, it helps in the transportation of nutrients, it helps in the transportation or circulation of hormones, it helps in the circulation of heat, it helps in the transportation of protective substances which is required for the survival of a human body. And it also helps in the formation of blood clots to prevent excessive blood loss. So coming to the components of blood, so blood is mainly made up of four components. The first being your plasma, second being your platelets, third being your RBC, and the last being your WBC. Right? So platelets mainly constitute about 55% of the entire blood volume. Platelets are around 0.01%. Red blood cells, they constitute around 41%, and white blood cell, they constitute about 4%. And white blood cells, they are further subdivided into 5 categories. Now, the first component of the blood is your plasma, right? So, the constituent of plasma is mainly water and certain dissolved and suspended substances, right? So, water mainly constitutes about 90 to 92%. And the different substances which are present in the plasma include your plasma protein, inorganic salts, nutrients, waste material, hormones, and certain amount of gases. Now coming to your red blood cells. So red blood cells, they are also termed as your erythrocytes, right? So RBCs, they are by far the most abundant type of blood cells, and 99% of all blood cells are your erythrocytes. Erythrocytes are mainly biconcave disc-like structures with no nucleus. They do not contain any nucleus, right? The red blood cells, they survive for around 120 days, and after 120 days, the blood cells, they die and new blood cells are formed. Now, red blood cells, they contain a special protein which is termed as your hemoglobin, and the main function of hemoglobin is to carry oxygen and carbon dioxide across the body, right? Now, blood appears red in color because of large number of red blood cells which get their color from the protein which is termed as hemoglobin. Now coming to white blood cells. So white blood cells are also termed as your leukocytes. So these cells have an important function in defense and immunity. They detect foreign material or any abnormal material and destroy it through a large range of defense mechanism, and different defense mechanism we'll be studying in our coming lectures, right? Now leukocytes, they are the largest blood cells, but they account for only 1% of the blood volume. As I told you in my last slide that red blood cells do not contain any nuclei, but in case of white blood cells contain nuclei. Now coming to the last component of your blood, that is your platelets. So platelets is also known as thrombocytes, right? So unlike red blood cells and white blood cells, platelets are not exactly cells, but they are small fragments of cells. Platelet helps in the blood clotting process, and that blood clotting process in technical terms is known as coagulation. Right? They mainly work by gathering at the site of an injury. They stick to the lining of the injured blood vessels and they form a platform kind of a structure on which blood coagulation can occur. Okay, now a very important point is, where do blood cells come from? Right? So blood cells, they developed from hemopoietic stem cells. Stem cells are those cells which are capable of giving rise to different types of cells in the human body. Right? And they are formed in the bone marrow through a process which is termed as hematopoiesis. So hematopoiesis is a process through which different blood cells are formed. Right? So hematopoietic stem cells, they are capable of being transformed into red blood cells, white blood cells and platelets. Right? Now these stem cells, they are found circulating in the blood and the bone marrow in people of all age groups. Now let's just quickly discuss function of each and every component of the blood. So RBCs, they help in the transport of oxygen throughout the human body. Leukocytes, they support the immune mechanism. Subdivision of white blood cells contain lymphocytes, which includes T cells and B cells, which helps fighting against virus and tumors. Neutrophils, they help fight bacteria and fungal infection. Eosinophils play a role in the inflammatory response. Basophils, they help in the release of histamine, and histamine is necessary for inflammatory responses. Macrophages, they help in engulfing and digesting debris like bacteria. And platelets, which is also termed as thrombocytes, they help in the clotting of blood. So these are the functions of the different components of the blood. So thank you so much, dear students. This was all in today's lecture. Today we studied about the body fluids and the different components of blood. If you have any queries, any doubt in today's lecture, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you for attending the lecture.